Hey there, welcome to the With Purpose podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. When I was a child, I was bullied very intensely, and because of that, I've kept myself in a protective box. I've noticed that in my adulthood that I tend to hide myself away from things and I don't step outside of my comfort zone. Um, as a result, my comfort zone is really, really tiny. Like, if I think that there's even a small chance that something might be frightening or might result in any form of confrontation, even if it's not a negative one, I tend to not engage. This podcast is my attempt to start changing that. I don't believe that I can achieve anything as a human being if I continue to stay in my very tiny bubble. The topics on this podcast, it will result in more human development, empowerment, and to stimulate conversation. As I've said, I've kept myself in a bubble, so as a result, I've spent a lot of time observing others and observing behaviors and questioning why we do the things we do. And I believe that I have a lot of insight into the topic, and I'd like to share it and maybe have others comment and argue my points. I like learning, I like knowing, I like broadening my perspective, and I like getting others to try and do the same, because it seems that we're kind of regressing in that aspect. We are tending to stop doing that now. We're tending to keeping ourselves isolated and keeping our opinions as what they are, and no opinions being anything of value if they don't correspond with the ones that we have. There will be a podcast every Sunday. I'm going to attempt to make this into a regular thing. There are so many topics that I have in mind that I'd like to share with you, and I'd really like to have others' opinions on, because it makes a lot of sense in my mind, but maybe your mind might come up with something even more amazing and even more fascinating. So I will post new podcasts every Sunday. I'm trying to figure out how to use the different platforms that are available. So right now I'm going to be using YouTube. I don't have a camera right now that I can use to make it into a visual thing as well, so you can see me while I do this. But I've been using that as an excuse not to do the podcast for so long that I've decided that regardless, if you have an idea, you have to get up and do it. Don't make excuses. Don't let life decide whether or not you can do whatever you choose to do. So for now, and besides, nobody's going to be watching this right now anyway. So as a learning process, I can use this to become better at communicating, which is something that I struggle with, and I can practice until I get to the point where I can afford to purchase a camera that I can make this into an actual show. You can find me on my website, which is www.emiliabaptist.com or www.emiliabaptiste.com, all one word. I don't have any social media yet because I don't have any fans to who would want to keep up with that. But as time goes on, I will make that into a thing that is available as well. Today's topic is going to be on the self-barrier. This is something that I've been thinking about for such a long time, and it is very complex. The ideas are kind of jumbled up in my head, so just bear with me while I attempt to verbalize the thoughts that are floating up there. The self-barrier, it starts off with human instinct. As we all know, instinct, its purpose is to keep us alive. The survival instinct, rather. Its purpose is to keep us alive. Its purpose is to keep the species alive. So there are some imperatives that we feel as human beings, such as the need to eat, the need to stay alive, so not doing anything dangerous, and the need to procreate. These are instincts that bear on us they affect our decisions on a daily basis. Imagine, for example, that you did not feel fear. What would prevent you from stepping off a cliff? The survival instinct's job is to prevent you from doing that. So this is why we have that heart racing, heart palpitating fear when we're about to do something that's considered dangerous. The survival instinct not only plays a part that way, though we don't realize it, but it actually encompasses so much more of our lives. How do I break this down? Okay, let's look at it this way. When you make any decision right now, you probably do not realize that you're making that decision based on the survival instinct. It is a driving force within our minds, and on a daily basis, everything we do has to do with that survival instinct. So the people you are friends with, the job that you have, all of that has to do, all of it pertains to the survival instinct. How do I verbalize this better? It controls everything you do. So for example, let's say you have noticed that you're starting to gain some weight, and you want to become more physically fit because you realize that the years will add up, and before you know it, you will be an overweight 60-year-old who's unable to walk. But you're in your 30s right now and you want to do the exercise. You know why you have to do it. You know why it's important, and you know that by doing it, it will increase your lifespan. Yet you have difficulty actually getting up and doing the exercise, or if you actually get up, after maybe a little bit of discomfort, your mind tells you to quit. That is a survival instinct. Let me explain why. Basically, the survival instinct's imperative is for you to survive right now, for you to eat, and for you to procreate. Exercising has nothing to do with those things. Technically, yes, it does in the long run, but survival doesn't care about the long run. It cares about it the right now, right this second. So if whatever you want to do has nothing to do with those three imperatives, you're going to have a hard time getting up. You're going to have a hard time getting any of these things done, because the survival instinct is a driving force, or it thinks it's a driving force, and we let ourselves become subjugated by it because we think it's a driving force. But all you have to do is get up. I realize that most people don't understand the factors that are working against them, so they find it difficult to get up. And that's not even true. Even when you are aware of the factors working against you, like myself, I am aware that the reason why I don't want to do certain things is because it doesn't pertain to my survival, but it still ends up being difficult. All you have to do is tell yourself, why do I want this? Like, I want this for me personally. Let me put it in a different way. We have evolved to have reason. We've evolved to have personality, to have things that we want that are outside of the survival instinct. Yet, we are not using that ability and that gift, because if you look around our planet, so many other animals also have intelligence, also have sentience, but they are completely enslaved by that instinct. We have the ability to say no. We have fought for that freedom, for that right, and yet we still act like we are one of those animals who don't have the ability to say, I decide that I will run that mile today, regardless of the discomfort I will feel. I've been thinking about this thing for a while now. I'm sure my thoughts are going to be scattered all over the place, but I'm just going to go with it. I've heard of this theory called the Fermi paradox. It basically talks about, if there's so many planets around stars in their livable or in their habitable zones, why haven't we found any alien life form. The scientists assumed, or they theorized that the reason why we haven't found any alien life forms is because there are barriers. So, for example, in the beginning of the evolution of the development of our planet, there were asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, probably biological, maybe viruses that wiped off like generations of animals. So they're assuming that a lot of those things probably happened on other planets, and even though it seems that life is very resilient on Earth, it's probably not so much so in other galaxies or on other planets, and that we probably were very fortunate and very lucky with the placement of our planets. They're assuming that maybe there are great filters, which is those barriers, but there are also species related filters, such as like the human race, where we have wars, we there are famine, there's all those human things that cause that for example, if you assume how would the world end, you could probably assume it's something that human beings did, maybe the global warming, because we were not careful with the ozone layer and the greenhouse gases. You could assume maybe something dramatic like a zombie apocalypse, although that is totally impossible. They're assuming that these filters are the reasons that we haven't found alien life forms, and that possibly we haven't reached that filter yet, and maybe sometime in the future we will reach that filter. I think that in fact the reason why the barrier that we might meet, or the barrier that other creatures may have met if it's not a natural one, is the self barrier. The self barrier. That is a topic I'm very passionate about. If you look at anything such as wars, any conflicts that a species or an individual has, it's usually something to do with the self barrier. That is when you cannot see outside of your own perspective. That means that, let's say, I use the animal kingdom as an example because it is so perfect to illustrate this fact. Let's say you are a predator in the African wilds or whatever, and you are hungry, and you see a baby impala or a gazelle or a baby zebra or some kind of animal, and you decide, I'm hungry. What do? Obviously, that creature will take that baby, eat it, and kill it, despite the fact that the mother is trying to save this poor creature which didn't get a chance to live. That is the self-barrier, or the survival instinct. The animal, the predator, is not able to see outside its own perspective to think, why do I get the chance to live and this creature does not? Its only thought is, this creature is going to provide me with food, which is a survival instinct. It cannot see outside of its own being. It cannot see anything outside of its own self-interest. So that is the biggest barrier we face. I think that the reason why we are the only species on this planet that's able to evolve and to create and to develop and to discover is because we somehow, luckily, I don't know how we did it, we were able to see outside of our own personal interest. Think about any discovery. What's the point of discovering anything? It's not going to put food on your table. It's not going to keep you alive. Well, yes it will, but you only find that out when you discover more. It's not going to give you more children or make you more fertile. Yes it will, but you don't know that until you discover it. The whole wanting to know more, the whole asking more questions, the whole wanting to discover, all of that comes from a place outside of your own self-interest, because discovering things, now that we've evolved, now it's part of our self-interest because it has become part of who we are. But when we were just coming outside of the animal kingdom, It was not, we didn't need to know any of those things. We chose to think, if we do this instead, how will that work? If instead of me just eating for myself and not sharing, and instead I ask maybe this group to be gardeners, this group will be hunters, this group will be builders, what happens? Because we decided to think outside of the individual and started to think as a community, we were able to get ourselves outside of the animal kingdom, and now we can live in safety. When you observe our animal kingdom on earth right now, you see that people assume that animals have no intelligence, they're not aware of the fact that they are alive, and I completely disagree with that. Animals are fully sentient. They're very much aware of their lives. I watched a video where a male adult zebra was deliberately attempting to drown a baby zebra. It wasn't like an accident. He was holding the baby's head under the water. That means he is aware of the difference between life and death, and he is aware that this child is not his, or this baby, or whatever they call baby zebras, is not his, and he doesn't want it. That is consciousness, that is sentience, that is awareness. But he is not thinking as a community. He's thinking for his own self-interest. This is not my offspring. Why do I have to take care of it? Instead of thinking as a group. I went on a YouTube roll where I was watching animal videos. I don't know why they were recommending them to me, but it was necessary for this to happen because it really changed my perspective. I watched one zebra get attacked, and the entire herd was maybe about 4 meters away, and they were all just looking at this poor creature getting killed. And not if they just went as a group and decide, because I've heard that a zebra's kick could actually kill a lion. If they went as a group to try to save this other creature, part of their community, it could have survived. Yes, the lion needs to eat, but one creature needs to step out of being selfish for them to evolve. They will never be able to evolve like we have. So I think that is our biggest issue, and you can see this. We're starting to get back to that point again in our reality. For if you look at any war, if you can decide to kill another, maybe a country decides to attack another country, that is part of the self barrier, because that means that you cannot see outside of your own perspective. You are right, they are wrong. You have the force, you will subjugate them. That's the same mentality of the animals, and that's, if we continue to be like that, we will never evolve. And I'm seeing that our race is starting to plateau. People are starting to not plateau, let's say it's starting to regress. Look right now, it's 2017. Last year, Syria issue. People were upset, they were closing their borders. That is not us. We do not ignore the cries of our fellow men. That has never been who we are. We have always wanted to help. We've always helped each other. You look at Brexit. Again, that is self-motivated. They don't want others inside, and that was the main reason why the Brexit vote went through, is because the population thought that if they left the Brexit, then if they left the European Union, they would have more for themselves. Again, that is self-motivated, and that is self-interest. And if we continue to be like that, we're not going to survive. We're not going to evolve, and we won't get to the level that I know that we can reach. There's so much potential in the human race. We haven't even began to hit the surface yet. We think we're so super smart and whatnot. We haven't even scratched the surface yet of where we can go. We only have a limited amount of time to reach that level. So we need to stop being so self-motivated. Individually and as a community, we're doing this so much. If you have an argument with somebody, you have a disagreement. Let's not say argument. Let's say you have a disagreement. If you cannot put yourself in that person's shoes to understand where they're coming from, then we have a problem. If you think I am right, you are 100,000% wrong, we have a problem. You need to be able to put yourself outside of your own perspective, because your eyes will lie to you. What you see and what you hear is not exactly what is actually being shown or said to you. Everything goes through a filter of our own biases, our own values before it gets processed. So that's why you hear there's your truth, their truth, and the real truth. Whatever you're seeing right now, whatever you're hearing right now, it's not actually what is actually happening. It's all going through a filter of your values and your perspectives. That's why one person can see one thing and somebody can see something else in the exact same situation. I like to do perspective exercises where I put myself outside of situations. Sometimes I try to do this thing where I try to cast my mind above the earth and just look at humanity as a pretend I'm an alien and I'm seeing the human race for the first time, or I'm trying to say, who are they? Why did this happen? Just trying to understand the things that we take for granted. I try to visualize different things like what would it be like to be right next to the sun? Like, just think of the majesty of the sun. It can hold 1.3 million Earths, and Earth is technically, on our scale, Earth is huge. On a galactic scale or on a universal scale, Earth is tiny. Even our sun is tiny, but on a human scale, Earth is huge. And our sun right now, only 8 light minutes away, that there's a thing out there that can hold 1.3 million Earths. I try to do these things to put myself outside of perspectives. I read a book and I try to put myself into the minds of the minor characters, the dispendable ones who are killed off. I try to put myself into their perspectives to see, why did they do the things that they did? So I can better understand, and so I cannot be always clouded by my own opinions, because my opinions will always be self-motivated, especially if I don't step outside of myself. A couple of years ago, I was watching either a television show or a movie, and inside it, the characters were looking at a picture in a museum. It was a picture of a terrorist holding a gun to another man who looks like him, like maybe they were from the same country, or they both had the turbans, and one guy was holding the gun to the other guy's face, and he was knelt down with his hand behind his head. And the lady in the show or movie or whatever, she was asking somebody else, which side would you like to be on? And I don't know why, it stuck with me, because if I had to choose, obviously, I would want to be the guy who's holding the gun. But has anybody thought of the perspective of the guy who's kneeling on the ground? Think of what he is feeling when he has lost all control of his life. Like, he is not in control at that moment, and imagine the fear that he's feeling, because the whims of the person, his captor, determines whether or not he gets to leave. So if we do exercises like that, where we try to put ourselves outside of our body, let's say you have that argument, put yourself in that other person's shoes. Let's say you believe in this thing, they believe in that thing. Try and see that. You don't have to change your opinion. Just see them. They're a person. They're there. Just see their opinions, see their thoughts, acknowledge it. You don't have to change yours. Just see it. And I bet you so much of the conflicts that we have right now would disappear. Maybe not all of it, because sometimes you need to go a little bit deeper, but the majority of the conflicts that we have right now would disappear. Maybe they would become just debates, which is very civil, instead of being where personal attacks get flung out. I was watching this anime last year called Sinbad. It's on Netflix. It's a Japanese remake of the show Sinbad, and that show really it spoke to me, but not in a good way, in a fearful way. Basically, the plot is that human in this other reality, a tower appeared, where at the top of the tower there was unimaginable treasures. It appeared outside neighboring kingdoms, so the different kings would send thousands of men, armies, just with the purpose of capturing that tower. The goal was that if their army was able to capture the tower, they would use the funds to conquer the other neighboring countries. And what ended up happening was none of those men were able to actually survive past the first floor, except for Sinbad, who was able to. There were so many like trials inside there, monsters and creatures and whatnot. Only Sinbad was able to reach to the top to get the genie and obviously the treasures. I put that into a perspective of species and life and that barrier that the scientists talked about. I'd like to assume that the human race is Sinbad, because we like to win. We believe that we are special because we have evolved to a level where we can actually feasibly put somebody outside of this planet into space. I like to think that that's who we are because we've overcome so much adversity, natural and man-made, to become who we are right now. But then I had a very chilling thought. What if in reality we are not Sinbad? What if we are one of those men, our species is one of those men who is destined to not actually reach to the top? Maybe all the other men represent the other species out there who have never reached any level. Like maybe we are one of the men who maybe reach level 2 instead of dying at level 1, but Sinbad is somebody else. And that just made me feel so uncomfortable. I will not accept the fact that we are not Sinbad. We are meant to be so much more. There's so much potential in our species. There's so much that we can reach, so much we can go to. There's no way that we're not Sinbad. But if we're not Sinbad, then we're in trouble. And I feel like we're on the verge of changing our role in that show. We're becoming so self-motivated, not self-motivated, that's not the right word. We're becoming more interested in our own selves, and we're regressing so much that I feel like maybe we're deciding to not be Sinbad anymore, and we're choosing to become one of the other people in that room, and I'm not okay with that. And I'm sure you're not okay with that either. I like to think that maybe there are other creatures out there in the universe, but maybe they have hit the self barrier. I imagine that they're probably like the animals on our planet. They're there, they just don't care about what's up there. They're just happy to be alive and eat and procreate, and that's all they care about. I imagine somewhere out there in the universe, some alien creature grazing on like blue grass or something, and it doesn't really care about human beings. We always assume that intelligent life will just appear one day, but has anybody thought of the fact that there are millions, maybe billions of species of animals on Earth, and we are the only ones? Maybe the same things happened elsewhere. So that's my I kind of went off much longer than I was expecting. I hope that you like this podcast and you enjoyed this topic, or at least it stimulated you to giving me a rebuttal. If you have an idea of, if you like the idea or you think you have an opposing idea, I'd be very happy to hear it. Please take some time to leave a comment. I will definitely read it and definitely give you my opinion. Nothing aggressive, obviously. That sounded a little more aggressive than I was thinking in my head. But I'd like to hear what others think of this view. Maybe I didn't explain it as well as I'd like. I'll probably listen to this again, and maybe I'll hit on this topic again. I'm sure it will probably show up a lot sparingly in the other things that I talk about, because I really think that it's the biggest reason that we're not reaching the potential that we should. Please take some time to like and share this podcast with others. Help me get the word out there that I'm here, and we can get a community of people who think about things and who don't just accept things as they are. Take some time to subscribe. That would help me out very much. And like I said, there are new podcasts every Sunday. Once again, I would like to thank you so much for listening all the way through here. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.